discussion around patterns of immigration. Unemployment is in fact one of the major obstacles affecting young Africans, and many are not confident of a better life on the continent. Now, according to a survey done by Afrobarometer in 34 countries, more than 1 in 3 Africans have considered emigrating, and this sentiment appears to be particularly strong among the educated youth. Now, Afrobarometer's Gugu Nonjinge joins us now to discuss this even further. Gugu, thanks very much for your time. And I'm just looking at this article around the research that Afrobarometer did, and it's not surprising that finding work and escaping poverty are among the top reasons for these immigration patterns.
Definitely. I think also what I've tried outlining in the article itself, and also as shown by the Afrobarometer data, is that if Africa is not actually harnessing the potential of its youth, really, its success really depends on it. And I think it's now the time that our African government, not just in South Africa, but across the continent, actually takes this data into matter, because these are the youngest people or the youngest population within the continent that it's willing to leave their respective countries to find work and to also escape poverty from their respective countries. And I think that's something that we need to actually zoom and dive into as a civil society as well.
I don't know if you just heard the Home Affairs Minister speaking to us there on the line, and he says government is actually doing a lot to ensure that our young educated youth stay in the country. Do you agree?
Well, I share a very different sentiment to the minister, because I definitely think that it all bottles down to the quality of education that young South Africans or other Africans in different countries are actually getting from their respective countries. And I think for me, skills development is something that we need to focus on quite intensively, and the quality of educations that young people are receiving, because it is then that they be able to compete in the global scheme of things when we're speaking about unemployment and employment. South Africa, again, still has the largest unemployment rate. It is, again, together with other countries, but also, as you can see those numbers, again, a number of young people are still relatively unemployed compared to other age groups. When we disaggregate our data by age and by gender, most people that are likely to emigrate or leave their respective countries, Afrobarometer shows that it is men, and also it is those with post-secondary qualifications. And then again, it is those between the ages of 18 to 25. Those are the youngest people qualified, but also, as I mentioned, they are not employable, because chances are the skills that they have does not enable them to actually compete in the global or the grander scheme of things when it comes to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And the numbers you're talking about, it overlaps with our unemployment numbers. That segment of the youth where unemployment is most rife, it coincides with the research that you've done as well. But just in terms of possible solutions, it's not just about ensuring that young educated people stay in the country, but it's also about ensuring that our education system matches our needs in different industries, isn't it?
Definitely. I think also, if we are looking now in 2019, there is the talk about the 4th industrial revolution, right? However, what we need to actually, before we even take that discussion into consideration as a country alone, not just in the continent, we need to make sure that the skills that we produce or the skills that we have in a country enable us, before we can start even speaking about the things that we need to in order to be practicing or in order to be competing in the 4th industrial revolution. Is our education system quality enough for our young kids or our young people to actually be speaking such terms in order for us to start introducing tablets in schools? Is there even quality resources in the schools? It all bottles down to that. The infrastructure that we have in our South African schools, we need to start talking about that before we can start using these bigger terms, and also before we start anointing ourselves and also appointing ourselves to actually start speaking about skills that are needed in order for young people to actually practice in the grander or the global scheme. It bottles down to the quality of education that we have.
Yeah, Gugu, we are out of time. I just want to ask you one more question. You know, we talk about this ominous term, the brain drain. How do we lure those young educated South Africans back to the country?
I think for me, more than anything, it is calling the young people to the table. I think it is a time for inclusion. It's also the time for having these intergenerational conversations, because currently, right now, we have countries, or rather not necessarily South Africa alone, African countries where the African leaders are actually making decisions of what's needed within the country when it comes to enabling young people to participate in their respective countries. I think now's the time for them to actually call into young people to the table, to actually discuss this type of matters and not make decisions based on what they've learnt, but also call those who actually experience this unemployment and have broader discussions that would not only impact the young people's lives, but also serve the successes of each and every country within the continent.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much for your perspective. Gugu Nonjinge joins us from Afrobarometer as we continue to track trends of immigration.